the actual pieces or components you guys are going to be tested on for our next proficiency. So to be proficient, you need to understand word meaning as it relates to creating a suspenseful tone within a story, and connotation and figurative meaning. So at the end of tonight's video, you're going to learn what you will be asked to do on your next proficiency, understanding words that help promote suspense and words that hold figurative meaning, and understanding the connotation and how that helps build with tone. So the standard we're working on is Standard Reading Literature 4, which basically is asking you to determine the meanings of words and phrases that are used in the text. So in this case, we're reading pieces written by Poe. You need to be able to understand the figurative and connotative meanings. And we did briefly talk about connotation and denotation in our inference unit. Or maybe it was in night, actually. I think it might have been in night. So it was just recently we talked about it. Yeah, it was during night when we did the concept where we were talking about simile and metaphor, figurative language, I believe. So that kind of implicit meaning, so that goes back to the inference unit that we did. So all of this is kind of building one on top of another, in other words. You need to be able to analyze the impact of specific word choices on tone as well. So, word choice and suspense. At this point, you've learned a little bit about Edgar Allan Poe's life. That's what you should have done in your homework last night. And you have probably guessed that he is what some would consider the father of the horror short story genre. So we're going to read 2 poems and 2 short stories by Poe in class. It's a shorter unit, this unit that we're doing. And we're going to be paying really close attention to his word choice, because he does actually use some pretty specific words to help build tone. And we talked about tone, if you remember, in concept video number 1. So that was your homework on Monday. You're going to be asked on this proficiency to pull out at least 10 words that help show the tone of the piece, and that is not difficult, so I'm not going to spend too much more time on it. But how is it that you can tell if a word shows tone? Well, you need to be thinking about the author's feelings towards the subject. What is his purpose in writing the piece? What do you need to learn from the story? And it's important to realize also that the narrator is not Poe. While we can pull examples and ideas from his real life, it is important to separate the two. And you can't refer to the narrator in Telltale Heart, for example, to Poe. It's not Poe. It's someone completely different. He's wrote a character. Same for the Cask of Amontillado. The main character is not Poe, it's someone else. So just be keeping that in the back of your mind the whole time that we talk about this. The words that show tone are going to be descriptive. They're going to help build the tension and the setting of the story. So when I talk about pulling 10 or more words, these are some of the things you need to be keeping in the back of your mind as we prepare and get ready to do that. Okay, so connotation in this proficiency. So again, we talked about connotation briefly in the last unit, and it's the emotional feeling or idea that's associated with that word. So in the proficiency, you're going to be asked to find quotes that have words with connotative meaning or figurative meaning, and you're going to be asked to explain the connotative or figurative meaning of that quote, very similar to what we did in the inference unit, short stories on the Holocaust. And a lot of you needed a lot more work on being able to clearly identify the implied meaning. So that's kind of what we're looking at here. So, for example, when you call someone, excuse me, I'm yawning. It's late at night. Sorry, I'm making this video late at night. And you're just going to have to deal with the fact that I just yawned on video. Fabulous. Okay. So, when you call someone a chicken, what is the connotation attached to that word? First of all, the denotation is the direct dictionary definition. So, a chicken is, a domesticated animal that you keep for eggs or meat. But the connotation is that additional descriptive, adjective kind of word that has, connotation attached, which means, those words or feelings that are attached to those words. You just know, as a person that speaks English, that if someone calls you a chicken, doesn't mean you physically are a chicken. It has another implied meaning, and it means that you're being a coward in this instance. So hopefully you can see that there's a major difference between denotation and connotation. So I'm going to give you a little activity to do here. So what you're going to do is you're going to look at a group of words, and you're going to rank them or list them in order of positive connotation or positive feeling to negative connotation or negative feeling. So you're going to list the first one that's more neutral or positive and go upwards from there to the most, like the word you think is the worst of the grouping. And if you don't know the meaning of the word, then you're going to obviously need to look it up. So first group: thin, slim, lanky, skinny, gaunt, slender. So order those words according to you and your feelings attached to those words on positive words. Like, would you rather be called slender or skinny? Like, which word sounds better to you? So you're going to start positive and move to negative. So first listing positive. Okay, next group of word: aggressive, assertive, domineering, dynamic, pushy, forceful. Obviously, there are other words we could be using in here that are probably not appropriate to a school setting, so I'm keeping the words appropriate, but I'm sure you can tell that as you go up in the negative connotation area, that there's other words that you can probably think of that are much more, like foul and words that you wouldn't necessarily use in a classroom setting. It's interesting how those words become much more negative in a connotation when you start thinking of them that way. Okay, and then finally last grouping: shrewd, egghead, bright, clever, brilliant, cunning, smart, intelligent, brainy. I should have added like geek and nerd and stuff in there. You all know my feelings on that anyways, okay, so finish up this activity. We'll talk about that tomorrow. And again, we're just talking about connotation here. So we started with word choice and how to pick out different words that are associated with tone. Now we're talking about connotation, figuring out what that means and the emotions that are attached to those words. And then the other piece that we really needed to talk about, looks like I'm not quite done. So negative, neutral, positive connotation. So another just quick example on connotation. So a negative example would be to say there are over 2,000 vagrants in the city. You can think of a lot of more like negative connotative words that mean vagrant. But again, for this purpose, we're trying to, it's a class setting. Okay. A neutral one instead: there are over 2,000 people with no fixed address in the city. And then a more positive: there are over 2,000 homeless in the city. So more of like a politically correct way to say it. But you can see how you can definitely attach like an emotional feeling to, your word choice. It's really important to start thinking about word choice. I know I've said that all along. I know I've said all through your writing and your essays, a lot of you that have been kept from A's or really high scores, I keep talking about word choice, and I keep talking about your sentence structure. So this is kind of some of the pieces that come along with that. Not only just the academic language, but also the feeling evoked and the implied meaning evoked in the words that you're picking. Okay, finally we're going to talk about figurative meaning, and we're almost done. This is like second to last slide, I think. So this is another way of talking about implicit meaning, and again, inference unit, when we talked about implicit meaning. You're looking at what is implied in the text. So when we use the word figurative, that's meaning that it's not a literal translation, that what is used in the meaning of the word or the phrase is different by the meaning implied by it. So it's dependent on culture, on history, it's an indirect meaning. So again, building your knowledge, your schema, is going to be, incredibly helpful. The more you know, the better it is to imply the meaning. Okay, so you're finished. Do the digital whisk, and yes, this time there is a quiz, so don't forget to do that. And we'll talk about some of the activities we did in tonight's lesson tomorrow. Hopefully that cleared up a little bit for you on what's going to be asked of you for at least proficiency level for these first attempts on learning or reading Edgar Allan Poe. Okay, see you guys tomorrow.